The stars had never seemed so cold. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Earth Defense Station, watching the distant lights of Mars shimmer against the black. Her reflection in the transparent steel showed a woman who had aged 10 years in the past month. The weight of 8 billion lives pressed against her shoulders like gravity itself. It had started with wonder. First contact. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries. When the massive ships appeared at the edge of the solar system, every person on Earth held their breath. The vessels were beautiful, constructed from materials that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways. They moved with grace that defied physics as humans understood it. The Valorian Galactic Collective had sent their greetings in perfect English, Spanish, Mandarin, and 200 other languages. Their translation technology was flawless. Their diplomats were polite. Their smile equivalent seemed genuine enough through the video feeds. Earth's leaders had gathered in New Geneva for the historic first meeting. Chen had been there, standing in her dress uniform behind the Secretary General. She remembered the exact moment everything changed. High Exarch Velnoth, the Valorian representative, had presented what he called the integration protocols. The translator rendered his words with mechanical precision. Humanity had been evaluated, he explained. Biological scans completed during their approach had revealed promising characteristics. Humans were classified as Category 7 labor species, strong bodies, adaptable minds, useful hands. The Valorian Empire required 60% of Earth's population for immediate deployment to labor, installations across their 10,000 worlds. The remaining 40% would maintain Earth under Valorian supervision. All military forces were to be dismantled within 10 standard cycles. Resistance was unnecessary. This was how things worked in the civilized galaxy. 83 species currently serve the Empire. Humanity should feel honored to join them. The silence in that chamber had been absolute. Then the Secretary General had stood. Chen would never forget his words. Simple, direct, delivered in a voice that did not shake. No. Velnoth had seemed confused. The translation must have failed, he suggested. Perhaps human language was more complex than their systems indicated. He repeated the integration protocols, more slowly this time, as if speaking to children. The Secretary General had not repeated himself. He simply walked out. Every human representative followed. The meeting lasted 4 minutes. Dr. Marcus Webb had tried to explain it to Chen later. He was the chief xenobiologist, the man who had spent weeks trying to understand Valorian psychology. They had made a mistake, he said. A fundamental error in judgment. The Valorians had conquered their galaxy through overwhelming force 10,000 years ago. Then they had convinced themselves it was mercy. In their minds, they were benefactors, protectors. The labor species should be grateful. They had never encountered a species that said no. Not in 10 millennia. Their entire civilization was built on compliance. Their military doctrine assumed surrender. Their integration protocols had no contingency for refusal, because refusal was not supposed to be possible. The Valorians gave Earth 30 days to reconsider. Chen had used every minute. Defense satellites were repositioned. Missile platforms that were supposedly decommissioned were quietly reactivated. Every railgun, laser battery, and kinetic weapon humanity had developed was brought to full readiness. The Mars colonies worked around the clock building more. Nobody really believed it would be enough. The Valorian Collective controlled 10,000 worlds. Earth had barely colonized 3. But Chen remembered something her grandfather had told her. He had been a soldier in one of the last wars before unification. Sometimes, he said, the only choice is to make them pay for every inch. On day 30, the Valorian 47th Subjugation Fleet arrived. 200 ships. Each one large enough to carry 10,000 soldiers. High Exarch Velnoth commanded from the flagship Eternal Decree. He broadcast one final message before the attack began: compliance or correction. Those were the options. The Empire had been patient. Now patience was exhausted. The fleet would disable Earth's primitive defenses, occupy the major cities, and begin processing the population. Some casualties were inevitable during correction operations, but the Valorians would be as gentle as circumstances allowed. Chen gave the order. Every weapon system opened fire simultaneously. The battle lasted 16 hours. Earth's forces fought with everything they had. Nuclear missiles, Kinetic kill vehicles traveling at significant fractions of light speed, cyber attacks, biological weapons, things that violated every treaty humanity had signed with itself over the past 2 centuries. The Valorians were shocked. Their shields held against most of it. Their point defense systems were sophisticated, but they had never faced opponents willing to ram ships into their formations. They had never encountered nuclear mines that waited dormant until a vessel passed, then detonated at point-blank range. They had never imagined anyone would deliberately crash a space station into their flagship. By hour 16, the battle was over. The Valorian fleet was destroyed. Not defeated, not driven off, destroyed. 198 ships reduced to debris. Only 2 managed to jump away, both badly damaged. Earth had captured the Eternal Decree intact when Chen's boarding team secured it from the inside. Velnoth was among the prisoners, but the cost had been terrible. The defense stations were gone. Most of the satellite network was destroyed. The Mars colonies had taken hits. 30,000 human soldiers had died. Earth's military was shattered. And somewhere out there, the Valorian Empire was receiving the battle data. Learning. Preparing. Chen stood in front of Velnoth's cell that night. The High Exarch looked at her through the transparent barrier. He seemed more puzzled than angry. Why, he asked. Why had humans fought? Did they not understand they would lose eventually? The Empire had resources beyond counting. This was only the beginning. Chen had smiled. It was not a kind smile. She told him about the captured ships, about the technology her engineers were already taking apart and understanding, about the encrypted files that revealed the locations of every Valorian installation within 100 light-years, about the databases that listed every enslaved species in every labor camp. Then she told him something else. Something that seemed to shake him more than the military defeat. Humanity had a saying, she explained. An old one. Never wound what you cannot kill. The Valorians had tried to enslave Earth. They had failed. Now they would learn what humanity did to slavers. Velnoth had not understood. Not then, but he would. They all would. Because Chen had realized something during those 30 days of preparation. The Valorians had made a mistake about humanity. A fundamental error. They thought humans were just another species to be categorized and controlled. They did not understand what humanity really was. Survivors. Innovators. A species that had climbed out of caves and split atoms. That had turned deserts into gardens and touched other worlds. That had fought itself for thousands of years and learned every lesson war could teach. The Valorians had tried to make humans slaves. That was their first mistake. Their last mistake would be thinking the war was over. Chen looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, the Empire waited. 10,000 worlds. Billions of citizens. Military forces that dwarfed Earth's entire population. Let them come, she thought. Let them send their fleets and their soldiers. Let them bring their ancient weapons and their empire's might. They would learn what every tyrant throughout human history had eventually learned. That the most dangerous thing in the universe is not the strongest predator or the most advanced weapon. It is someone with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The Valorians had declared humanity slaves. Earth's response was not submission. It was wrath. And that wrath was only beginning. 6 months passed like years. Earth transformed into something it had never been before. A war machine. Every factory that once produced consumer goods now built weapons. Every laboratory worked on military projects. Every person old enough to hold a wrench or write code contributed somehow. Humanity had one goal: survive the next attack. Dr. Marcus Webb barely slept during those months. His team had taken apart every piece of Valorian technology they could salvage. The work was slow, dangerous. 3 engineers died when a power core they were examining overloaded. But gradually, humanity began to understand. The Valorians were technologically advanced, yes, but their technology was old. Ancient in some cases. Their faster-than-light drives were elegant but followed principles discovered 10,000 years ago. Their energy weapons were powerful, but used designs that had not changed in millennia. Their armor was strong but relied on materials refined through tradition rather than innovation. Everything about Valorian technology spoke of a civilization that had stopped advancing. They maintained. They replicated. They did not create. Humanity did something the Valorians never expected. They improved it. Human engineers took the elegant FTL drives and made them faster by combining them with fusion technology the Valorians had never bothered to develop. They took the energy weapons and added railgun acceleration that increased range by 300%. They studied Valorian shields and found 17 weaknesses that could be exploited. Admiral Chen watched the prototypes with satisfaction and dread. Satisfaction because humanity was adapting faster than she had dared hope. Dread because intelligence reports showed what was coming. The Valorian Empire was not taking chances. The 47th Subjugation Fleet had been destroyed. The response would be overwhelming. 300 ships, the 12th, 15th, and 23rd Grand Fleets combined. Nearly 1 million soldiers. Earth could not win that fight. Not defending. Chen knew this. Her staff knew this. The political leaders who demanded she protect Earth knew this, even if they would not say it aloud. So Chen proposed something radical. Something that made the Secretary General pale when she explained it. They would not wait for the Valorians to attack. They would strike first, Operation Broken Chain. The name had been Webb's suggestion. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Humanity would use captured Valorian ships to infiltrate their space. They would hit the infrastructure. The labor camps, the processing stations, the logistics hubs that kept the Empire's slavery system running, not to destroy worlds, to free slaves. The Valorians would be forced to respond. They would have to split their forces, protect their holdings, deal with rebellions, and while they did, Earth would continue to learn, to adapt, to build. The operation was approved with one condition. Chen would lead it personally. If it failed, Earth needed someone else to command the defense. They launched 3 weeks before the Valorian fleets were scheduled to arrive. 20 ships, all captured Valorian vessels, repaired and upgraded with human technology. 1,500 soldiers, engineers, weapons specialists, people who volunteered knowing they might never see Earth again. Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the renamed Defiance, as they made their first jump. The first target was Processing Station Gamma 9. According to Valorian records, it held 40,000 enslaved beings from 6 different species. The station hung in orbit around a dead moon, massive and heavily shielded. Chen's fleet emerged from FTL space directly on top of it. The station's automated defenses activated immediately. They were fast, but not fast enough. Human missiles using Valorian stealth technology improved with Earth's programming, slipped through the shields before they could fully deploy. The station's power core went offline. Its weapons fell silent. Chen's boarding teams hit the docking ports 3 minutes later. The Valorian guards inside fought briefly. Then they realized what they were facing. Humans did not take prisoners this time. Not guards, not overseers, not anyone who worked for the slavery system. The slaves were another matter. Chen walked through the holding cells after the station was secured. She saw beings that looked like insects, large as humans with 6 legs and compound eyes. Others were aquatic, breathing through apparatus that looked painful. Some were mammals of sorts. Others were things she had no words for. All of them were thin, scarred, broken by years of labor. Through translators, Chen's people explained. They were from Earth. They were here to fight the Valorians. The slaves would be freed. But freedom came with a choice. They could be taken to a safe location, given supplies and left to rebuild. Or they could fight. Humanity would train them, arm them, teach them how to hurt their former masters. Nearly 30,000 chose to fight. The insectoid krill were especially eager. Their species had been enslaved for 800 years. They had tried to rebel twice. Both times the Valorians had killed millions in retaliation. But now they had allies. Now they had hope. And hope, Chen learned, was a dangerous thing to give someone with nothing to lose. Over the next month, Chen's fleet hit 11 more targets. Each time they freed slaves. Each time thousands chose to fight. The human soldiers taught them tactics, how to ambush, how to sabotage, how to turn every piece of Valorian infrastructure into a weapon against its creators. They taught them something else too, something the Valorians had never expected their slaves to learn. Rage. The Valorian Empire began to fracture. Rebellions erupted on 40 worlds. Supply lines were cut. Communications networks went down. The 3 grand fleets that had been sent to destroy Earth were recalled. Split up. Sent to deal with emergencies across 100 systems. It was exactly what Chen had planned. But the cost was higher than she had hoped. Earth's forces lost 6 ships, 3 to Valorian counterattacks, 3 to accidents as human-modified Valorian technology failed in critical moments. 400 soldiers died. Twice that number were wounded. And Chen knew this was only the beginning. The Empire was vast. It could absorb losses that would destroy humanity. But it had never faced a determined enemy before. It had never fought someone who refused to surrender. Messages reached Earth from the liberated species. They wanted to form an alliance. They called it the Free Species Coalition. Humanity would be its military core, they said. The other species would provide resources, labor, intelligence. Together they could resist the Empire. Together they had a chance. The Secretary-General accepted. Chen received new orders. Expand operations. Strike deeper. Make the Empire bleed. But be careful. Earth's forces were limited. Every loss hurt. Every ship mattered. The war was far from won. In fact, Chen suspected it had barely started. She was right. Intelligence intercepts showed the Valorian High Council meeting in emergency session. They were arguing. Some wanted to negotiate, to offer humanity client status instead of slavery. Others called for total war. To deploy weapons the Empire had not used in millennia. Ancient things from their conquering days. Planet killers. Reality warpers. Weapons that could sterilize systems the Council voted. 13-8. Total var. The extermination fleets would be activated. Chen read the report twice. Then she called her senior officers together. They needed to know what was coming. They needed to prepare, because the Valorians had just made a decision that would define the rest of the war. They had chosen to show humanity what the Empire was truly capable of, and humanity would respond in kind. Chen looked at her officers, men and women from a dozen countries, veterans and volunteers, people who had left everything behind to fight. She told them the truth. The war was about to get worse, much worse, but they had already proven something important. Humanity could hurt the Empire. They could win battles. They could inspire others to resist. The question now was whether they could do more than that, whether they could actually win. Chen did not know the answer, but she knew one thing with certainty. They would try, because the alternative was chains, and humanity had not come this far, had not survived this long to kneel before anyone. The Valorians had thought they were facing primitive barbarians. They were about to learn the truth. Humanity was not primitive. Humanity was practical, and when practical people go to war, they do not fight for honor or glory. They fight to win, by any means necessary. The Empire had started this conflict. Humanity would finish it. The war entered its second year. Earth had changed beyond recognition. Cities that once sparkled with lights now operated on strict power rationing. Parks had become training grounds. Schools taught engineering and tactics alongside mathematics and literature. Children grew up knowing the taste of ration bars and the sound of production quotas being announced over speakers. Admiral Chen returned to Earth only twice during those months. Both times she barely recognized her home. The planet had embraced total war with an efficiency that frightened her. Every person had a role. Every resource had a purpose. Earth's economy had transformed completely. Money still existed, but it meant little. What mattered was contribution. What you built. What you discovered. What you gave to the war effort. The Free Species Coalition had grown to 17 members. Each species brought something unique. The krill provided workers who could operate in environments that would kill humans. The aquatic Dornathi had knowledge of underwater construction techniques that humanity adapted for space stations. The reptilian Scrath were natural mechanics who understood machinery in ways humans found remarkable. But humanity provided something none of the other species had: leadership, strategy, the willingness to make brutal decisions. The other species had been slaves for so long that they struggled with independence. They waited for orders. They feared taking initiative. Centuries of obedience had been bred into them, if not genetically, then culturally. Humans had no such hesitation. Chen's officers taught the freed slaves something revolutionary: independent thought. How to question orders, how to adapt when plans failed, how to take risks. The Valorians had created perfect servants. Humanity was turning them into soldiers, and soldiers won wars. The extermination fleets arrived at the Krill homeworld on a Tuesday morning local time. Chen's forces were there defending. The Krill had been the first species to join the coalition. Their world was strategically important, positioned along a major trade route. Losing it would cut supply lines to 40 liberated systems. The battle was unlike anything humanity had experienced. The Valorian ships were different, larger, darker. They carried weapons that bent space itself. Chen watched in horror as one of her destroyers simply ceased to exist, folded into a point and compressed to nothing. Another ship was hit by something that made its hull age 1,000 years in seconds, metal crumbling to rust and then to dust. The Valorians had brought their ancient weapons, things they had not used since their empire was young, things they had forbidden themselves to use for millennia because they were too terrible even for conquerors. But humanity had pushed them to this point, had hurt them badly enough that they broke their own laws. Chen made a decision that would haunt her. The Defiance had captured one of the ancient Valorian weapons months before. Her engineers had been studying it, trying to understand how it worked. They called it a cascade torpedo. It would hit a ship's power core and cause a chain reaction that spread to every nearby vessel. Devastation on an unthinkable scale. She had not wanted to use it. The weapon was indiscriminate. It would kill everyone in the blast radius. But she watched the Valorian fleet systematically destroying her forces. She saw them moving toward the planet, preparing to use their terrible weapons on the surface, on the billions of krill who lived below, on the children in the cities. Chen gave the order. One torpedo, aimed at the center of the Valorian formation. It worked better than her engineers had predicted. The explosion consumed 30 Valorian ships instantly. The chain reaction spread to another 20. 50 vessels destroyed in 12 seconds. The Valorian fleet broke. They had never experienced losses like that. They jumped away, abandoning the battle. But the victory had a price. The weapon's effects had spread wider than calculated. 3 of Chen's own ships were caught in the edge of the blast. No survivors. And on the planet below, the explosion had been visible as a second sun. Millions of krill died from the radiation burst. Cities were evacuated. Medical teams worked for weeks treating the injured. Chen submitted her resignation that night. The Secretary General refused it. The krill leadership sent a message instead. They thanked her. Without her decision, the planet would have been sterilized. Millions died. Billions were saved. It was a trade the krill understood. That made it worse somehow, that they were grateful for the decision that had killed so many of them. Dr. Webb found her in her quarters afterward. He brought a bottle of whiskey he had been saving. They drank in silence for a while. Then he told her something he had learned from Valorian records. The Empire had been fighting this way for 10,000 years. Using weapons like these, making decisions like these. It was how they had conquered the galaxy. The difference was they had convinced themselves it was necessary, that their cause justified any action, that the ends made the means irrelevant. Humanity had to be careful. It was easy to become the thing you fought against. Easy to tell yourself that winning justified everything. Chen did not sleep well after that, but she continued to command, continued to make decisions, continued to fight, because someone had to, and if it destroyed her, if it broke something fundamental inside her soul, then that was simply the cost. Better her than someone who did not understand what they were sacrificing. The war expanded. 50 systems, then 100, then 200. The Valorian Empire was bleeding resources. Their economy, built on slave labor, was collapsing as workers rebelled. Their military was spread thin, fighting on hundreds of fronts. Their government was fracturing as different factions blamed each other for the disaster. But humanity was bleeding too. Earth's population had dropped by 2 million. Some to battle, some to accidents in the factories and shipyards, some to diseases that spread in the overcrowded conditions. The other coalition species contributed what they could, but they were recovering from centuries of enslavement. Humanity carried most of the burden. High Exarch Velnoth remained in his cell on Earth. Chen visited him sometimes. He had become an unusual resource, a window into Valorian thinking. He explained things that confused human strategists, why the Empire did things certain ways, what their cultural blind spots were. Where they were vulnerable, he had changed. No longer the confident conqueror who had presented integration protocols. He was frightened now, frightened of what humanity had become, frightened of what the war was doing to his own people. He told Chen that the Empire's leaders were debating something terrible, whether to use their final weapon, the thing they had built 10,000 years ago and sworn never to activate. Chen asked what it was. Velnoth refused to say. It was forbidden even to speak of it. But he warned her. If the Empire was pushed too far, if they truly believed they would lose, they would use it, and nothing would survive. Not the Coalition, not Earth, not the Empire itself. That night, Chen sat in her office and looked at the strategic maps. 200 systems liberated, 800 still under Valorian control. 1,000 battles fought, 10,000 more to come. The numbers were staggering. The losses were unbearable, and somewhere ahead a weapon waited that could end everything. She thought about her grandfather again, about his words on fighting, about making them pay for every inch. But there came a point where the price was too high, where paying it meant losing yourself. Humanity had to find a way to win that did not destroy what they were fighting for. The answer came from an unexpected source. A young engineer on Mars sent a proposal to Chen's staff. It was radical, risky, but it offered something the war had lacked so far. A path to victory that did not require humanity to become monsters. Chen read it 3 times. Then she called a meeting of her senior officers. They had work to do. Year 3 began with hope. The young engineer's plan had been refined, tested, and approved. Operation Final Dawn, they called it. Not an attack on Valorian worlds. Not another liberation mission. Something that would strike at the heart of what made the Empire possible, the throne world itself. Valoria Prime. Admiral Chen studied the intelligence for weeks. Valoria Prime was the oldest inhabited world in the galaxy. 10 billion Valorians lived there. The capital city alone housed more people than Earth. The planet was protected by defense systems that made Earth's pre-war defenses look primitive. Orbital platforms, energy shields that could stop asteroid impacts, automated weapon networks that tracked thousands of targets simultaneously. No one had attacked Valoria Prime in 8,000 years. The last species to try had been erased from existence. Their homeworld was still a dead zone, poisoned by weapons that made nuclear bombs look gentle. The Valorians had made their capital a warning. Attack us here and we will end you. But Chen saw something others had missed. The defense systems were ancient. Maintained, yes. Tested regularly, yes. But never actually used. Never refined by real combat. They were theoretical shields against theoretical enemies. And humanity had proven very good at turning theory into wreckage. The Free Species Coalition committed everything to the operation. 300 ships. Humanity provided half. The Krill contributed 50. The Dornathi, the Scrath, and 14 other species filled the rest. It was the largest military force the galaxy had seen since the Valorian conquest 10 millennia ago, and it was going to attack the one place everyone said was impossible to attack. They gathered at a staging point 3 systems away. Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked at the fleet displays. So many ships, so many species working together, slaves who had become warriors, victims who had become soldiers, all of them united by one purpose: to prove that the Valorian Empire could be beaten. Dr. Webb gave a final briefing before the jump. The attack would come in waves. First, electronic warfare to blind the sensors. Second, kinetic strikes on the orbital platforms. Third, the main fleet pushed through the resulting gaps. Fourth, landing forces to secure the Imperial Palace. The plan was sound. The execution would be brutal. High Exarch Velnoth had provided crucial intelligence. The locations of command nodes, weakness points in the shield network, emergency protocols that could be exploited. He did this knowing it meant betraying his own people. When Chen asked why, he simply said that the empire he had served was already dead. It had died when it decided to use the extermination fleets. Now he was just helping bury the corpse. The fleet jumped. 20 minutes of faster-than-light travel. Chen spent them in silence, reviewing the plan one final time. Her officers did the same. Everyone knew the odds. Independent analysis suggested a 70% chance of complete mission failure, a 20% chance of partial success, a 10% chance they would actually reach the planet, but they were going anyway, because 10% was better than nothing. They emerged in Valorian space and found a surprise waiting. The Valorians had known they were coming. Intelligence had leaked somehow, or perhaps the Empire had simply prepared for every possibility. Whatever the reason, Valoria Prime's defenses were active and ready, and they were not alone. 50 Valorian warships hung in high orbit. The battle began immediately. The Valorian ships moved to intercept. Chen's electronic warfare teams went to work, flooding the system with false signals and jamming transmissions. The orbital platforms opened fire. Energy beams cut through space, destroying 3 coalition ships in the first minute. Missiles flew in both directions. Space filled with debris and expanding clouds of gas from ruptured hulls. But humanity had learned. 3 years of war had taught them things the Valorians still did not understand. Human ships moved erratically, refusing to follow predictable patterns. They used the debris as cover. They coordinated in ways that confused Valorian targeting systems, and they fought with a desperation the Empire had never faced. Because this was not a battle. This was everything. Win here or lose the war. Chen watched as a Krill destroyer rammed an orbital platform at full speed. The explosion took out the platform and created a gap in the defenses. Human ships poured through. The Dornathi followed, their vessels designed for underwater combat proving surprisingly effective in the chaos of space battle. One by one, the platforms fell. The Valorian warships fought well. Their crews were trained. Their technology was still superior in many ways. But they were outnumbered, and they were facing enemies who did not retreat, could not retreat. This was the end game, the final push. Everything humanity and its allies had fought for came down to this moment. It took 4 hours. 4 hours of continuous battle. At the end, the orbital defenses were silent. The Valorian ships were destroyed or fleeing. The way to the planet was open. Chen's fleet had lost 80 vessels, 30,000 dead. But they had done the impossible. They had breached Valoria Prime's defenses. The landing forces deployed. 10,000 soldiers in dropships. Human, Krill, Dornathi, Scrath. Every species the Empire had enslaved now coming to its capital. The irony was not lost on anyone. Chen led the assault personally. She had started this war. She would finish it. The Imperial Palace was a fortress, walls that could withstand orbital bombardment, internal defenses that made breaching them a nightmare, guards who fought with religious fervor. But Chen's forces had something the Valorians did not. Experience. 3 years of urban combat. 3 years of learning how to fight in places that were supposed to be impregnable. They used explosives to create new entrances, breached walls from unexpected angles, flooded corridors with smoke and nerve agents, fought room to room with a ruthlessness that shocked even Chen. The liberated species remembered their years of slavery. They gave no quarter, asked for no mercy. This was vengeance, pure and absolute. Chen reached the council chambers 6 hours after landing. The High Council of Valoria waited inside. 13 beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They looked old, tired. They had expected to die in comfort, surrounded by luxury. Instead, they faced soldiers covered in dust and blood, carrying weapons that still smoked. The council leader spoke first. He offered surrender, unconditional. The Empire would dissolve. The labor camps would be closed. The slaves would be freed, all of it, everything humanity had fought for. He asked only that the killing stop, that the council members be allowed to live out their days in peace. Chen wanted to refuse. Part of her wanted to see them face justice for their crimes, for the billions enslaved, for the worlds destroyed, for everything the Empire had done in its 10,000 years of rule. But she thought about what Webb had said, about becoming the thing you fought against, about the cost of victory. She accepted the surrender. The council would face trial, war crimes tribunals, justice, not vengeance. It was the hardest decision she had made, harder than using the Cascade torpedo, harder than any tactical choice, because mercy for monsters felt like betrayal of their victims, but the alternative was to prove the Valorians right. That power made cruelty inevitable. The war ended that day. 3 years, billions dead, thousands of worlds scarred. But it was over. The Valorian Galactic Collective, an empire that had stood for 10 millennia, dissolved in a single afternoon. The labor camps were opened. The slaves walked free, and across the galaxy, species that had known only chains began to remember what freedom felt like. Chen stood in the council chambers long after everyone else had left. She thought about everything that had led to this moment, about the Secretary General saying no, about the first battle, about all the people who had died so that this day could happen. She had won. Humanity had won. But the victory tasted like ashes, because winning had cost them something precious. Their innocence, their belief that they were fundamentally good. War had shown them what they were capable of, and that knowledge would never leave them. Peace was harder than war. Admiral Chen discovered this truth in the months following the surrender. The Valorian Empire had dissolved, yes. The slaves were free, yes. But what came after was chaos. 1,000 worlds suddenly without government. Billions of beings who had lived under oppression now facing a vacuum of power, and humanity, willing or not, stood at the center of it all. The Free Species Coalition tried to become something more permanent, a galactic government. But the member species could not agree on anything. The Krill wanted revenge trials for every Valorian who had held authority. The Dornathi argued for reconciliation. The Scrath proposed splitting the former empire into independent zones. Humanity tried to moderate, but Chen quickly realized they were seen not as equals but as leaders. And that was dangerous, Dr. Webb warned her repeatedly. Empires that fell quickly often led to worse things. Civil wars, warlords, regional tyrants. The galaxy had been stable under Valorian rule, even if that stability was built on chains. Now those chains were broken and nobody knew what would replace them. Into that uncertainty, ambitious beings would step. Some wanting power, some wanting revenge. All of them dangerous. The war crimes tribunals began on Earth. It was a compromise. No species trusted another to be fair. Earth was seen as neutral, a new power without the baggage of the old conflicts. Chen watched the first sessions and felt sick. The evidence was overwhelming. The Valorians had committed atrocities across centuries, but many of the accused seemed genuinely confused. They had believed they were helping, civilizing, protecting lesser species from themselves. That made it worse somehow. At least if they had been monsters, if they had enjoyed the cruelty, there would be simple villains to punish. Instead, they were people, flawed, deluded, products of a culture that had convinced itself that might made right and that power carried responsibility to rule. Chen realized humanity could have become the same thing, could still become it if they were not careful. High Exarch Velnoth testified. He spent 3 days explaining the empire's structure, its history, its justifications for slavery. He answered every question, admitted to crimes, did not try to excuse them. When asked why he had helped humanity, he said something that stayed with Chen. He said that seeing humans fight had shown him what his empire had really been. Not a civilization, a prison, and he had been a guard who convinced himself the prisoners deserved their cells. The trials lasted 2 years. Hundreds of Valorian officials were found guilty. Sentences ranged from imprisonment to execution. Chen attended many sessions but never spoke. She had been a warrior. Justice was something she was still learning to understand. But she knew one thing. The galaxy needed this, needed to see that power could be held accountable, that crimes had consequences. Meanwhile, Earth changed again. The war economy could not sustain itself in peacetime. Millions of workers who had built weapons now needed new jobs. The military began downsizing. Ships were mothballed, soldiers returned home to find a world they barely recognized. The psychological toll was enormous. Earth's hospitals filled with people suffering from conditions that had no physical cause. War had marked them in ways medicine could not heal. Chen resigned her commission 5 years after the war ended. She was 47 years old but felt ancient. The military offered her positions, advisory roles, ceremonial commands. She refused them all. Instead, she took a small ship and traveled. Visited the worlds humanity had helped liberate. Saw what freedom looked like when it was new. The Krill homeworld had rebuilt. Cities rose from the ruins. The population was growing again. But Chen saw the memorials, monuments to the millions who had died during the war, to the billions who had died during centuries of slavery. The Krill had not forgotten, would never forget. They greeted her as a hero. It made her uncomfortable. Heroes were supposed to feel proud. She just felt tired. The Dornathi were different. They had transformed their world into something beautiful. Floating cities on vast oceans, art everywhere, music. They had taken their freedom and created something the galaxy had never seen. They told Chen that humanity had given them more than liberty. They had given them possibility, the idea that the future could be different from the past. Other worlds were struggling. The Scrath had split into factions. Some wanted to remain united, others sought independence. There was fighting. Nothing like the war, but people were dying. The coalition sent peacekeepers, tried to mediate, but you could not force species to get along. Freedom meant the freedom to make mistakes, to fail. To fight, Chen visited Valoria Prime last. The planet had fallen far. The capital was half empty. The palaces were museums now. showing the Empire's history without hiding its crimes. The Valorian population had shrunk. Many had emigrated, seeking places where their species was not hated. Those who remained were trying to build something new, a society without slaves, without conquest. They were struggling. She met Velnoth there. He had been released after serving his sentence. He worked now at one of the museums, gave tours, explained the Empire's weapons, its strategies, its failures. He looked older, broken in ways that went beyond physical. He told Chen he was glad she had come, that he wanted to show her something. He led her to a new monument. It stood in the center of the old council plaza, made of metal from scrapped warships, both Valorian and Coalition. It showed figures from every species, human, Krill, Dornathi, Skrath, Valorian, all of them standing together. The inscription was simple: never again, for anyone. Velnoth explained that young Valorians had built it, the generation born during or after the war. They were ashamed of what their empire had been. Determined to be different, they had created schools, programs, taught history honestly. They wanted to make sure their children understood what had happened, why it must never happen again. Chen stood in front of the monument for a long time. She thought about everything that had led to this moment. About the Secretary General's simple refusal, about the battles, about all the people who had died, about the empire that had ruled for 10,000 years and fell in 3. About the difficult peace that followed. She realized something standing there. The war had been necessary. Evil sometimes had to be fought with force. But the hard part was what came after. Building something better, not just destroying the old, creating the new, making sure that the free did not become the new oppressors. That victory did not breed arrogance. That power did not corrupt. Dr. Webb found her there. He had retired too. Was teaching now. Xenobiology at the new galactic university on Earth. He said student enrollment was at record levels. Species from across the galaxy sending their children to learn together, to understand each other. He thought it was working, slowly, but working. They walked through Valoria Prime together. 2 humans on a world that had tried to enslave their species. And they were safe. The Valorians they passed nodded respectfully. Some looked away in shame. But none showed hate. That was progress. Real, meaningful progress. The kind that mattered more than military victories. Chen asked Webb if he thought it would last. The peace. The coalition. Everything they had built. He admitted he did not know. History suggested that good times bred complacency. That people forgot. That the lessons of one generation died with them. But he also said that awareness of the danger was itself protection. That choosing to remember was an act of courage. That night, Chen returned to her ship. She had one more place to visit. Earth. Home. She had been away for 3 years. Traveling. Seeing the galaxy humanity had helped reshape. Now she wanted to see what had become of the world that had said no to an empire. As her ship jumped to faster than light, Chen thought about the future. About the children being born now who would never know slavery. About the monuments being built. About the trials and their verdicts. About the difficult work of maintaining peace. War had shown humanity's strength. Peace would test their wisdom. She hoped they were ready for it. Earth had changed again. Admiral Sarah Chen barely recognized the planet as her ship descended through the atmosphere. The scars of war were healing. Cities rebuilt. Forests replanted. The orbital defenses were gone, replaced by communication satellites and scientific stations. Earth had turned away from war, or at least it was trying to. She landed in New Geneva. The city looked different, cleaner, newer. The old government buildings had been expanded to accommodate the Galactic Council headquarters. Representatives from 80 species worked there now, making laws, settling disputes, trying to turn the coalition into something that could last. Chen wondered if it would work. History suggested empires always failed eventually, but maybe this time would be different. The Secretary General met her personally. He was older now. The war had aged him too. He greeted Chen warmly, called her a hero. She told him she was just a soldier who had done her job. He smiled sadly, said that was what all the best soldiers said. They walked together through the government complex. He showed her the changes, the new departments, the peacekeeping forces, the diplomatic corps training to handle conflicts before they became wars. But he also showed her the problems. The costs. Earth's economy was recovering but still struggling. The population had not rebounded. Birth rates were low. People were tired, traumatized. They had given everything to the war, and now they did not know how to live in peace. Mental health services were overwhelmed. Suicide rates were high among veterans. The invisible wounds were proving harder to heal than the physical ones. Chen visited the memorials. They were everywhere, in every city. Parks dedicated to those who died. Walls with names carved into stone. Digital monuments that showed faces and told stories. Earth had lost 2 million people. The number seemed abstract until you saw the names. Until you realized each one was a person. Someone with dreams. With families. With futures that never happened. She found her own name on one memorial. Not among the dead, but on a plaque honoring commanders. It made her uncomfortable. She had made decisions that killed people. Her own people. The Cascade torpedo at Krill Prime haunted her still. The memorial treated her as a hero. She felt like a survivor who had been lucky and ruthless in equal measure. Dr. Webb hosted a dinner that night. He had invited old friends. Officers Chen had served with. Engineers who had built the weapons. Diplomats who had negotiated the peace. They ate and drank and told stories. Some were funny. Some were sad. All of them were true. Chen realized this was therapy. For all of them, they needed to talk, to remember together, to acknowledge what they had been through. Someone asked if it had been worth it. The war, the cost, the lives, the trauma. Chen thought carefully before answering. She said she did not know. That worth was a word that implied value could be measured. How did you measure freedom against lives? How did you calculate the value of stopping an empire against the price of the weapons used? She said she had made the best decisions she could with the information available. That was all anyone could do. But she also said this. The Valorians had tried to enslave humanity. They had given Earth a choice. Submit or resist. And resistance had required everything. Every resource. Every sacrifice. Every moral compromise. If they had submitted, humanity would still exist. But not as humans. As property, as tools. As things without agency or dignity. She would not say the cost was worth it. But she would say the alternative was worse. The next day, Chen visited schools. The government had asked her to. They wanted children to hear from someone who had been there. She was nervous. What did you tell children about war? How did you explain killing and being killed? But she went. Because someone had to. Because the next generation needed to understand what had happened and why. The children asked hard questions. Why did you fight? Were you scared? Did you kill people? How many? Chen answered honestly. She told them war was terrible. That it destroyed things that could not be rebuilt. That it changed people in ways that never healed. But she also told them that sometimes terrible things were necessary. That evil existed and good people had to stand against it. Not because fighting was noble, but because the alternative was worse. One girl asked if Chen would do it again. If she knew then what she knew now. If she understood the cost. Would she still fight? Chen looked at the child. She was maybe 10 years old, born during the war. She had never known slavery, would never know chains. She lived in a galaxy where species could choose their own paths, where freedom was assumed, not fought for. Yes, Chen said, she would do it again. Not because war was good, but because slavery was worse. Because some things were worth dying for, worth killing for, worth sacrificing everything to prevent. She hoped this girl would never have to make such choices. But if she did, Chen hoped she would have the courage to do what was necessary. That night, Chen stood on a hill outside the city. She could see the lights spreading below. Ships coming and going from the spaceport. Earth was connected to the galaxy now, part of something larger. The isolation that had protected humanity for thousands of years was gone forever. They were galactic citizens now. With all the opportunities and dangers that implied, she thought about the Valorians, about their empire, about how it had stood for 10,000 years and fallen in 3. She thought about the cycles of history, about how the oppressed became the free, and how the free sometimes became oppressors. It was a pattern that repeated across time and space. The challenge was breaking it, building something that lasted without becoming the thing it replaced. Webb joined her on the hill. He brought coffee. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then he said something that stayed with Chen. He said that humanity had proven two things. First, that slaves made terrible victims. That people with nothing to lose fought with a desperation that could topple empires. Second, that humans could be liberators without becoming conquerors. They had broken chains without forging new ones. But, he said, the hard part was maintaining that balance. Power corrupted. Victory bred arrogance. The galaxy was looking to humanity for leadership. That was dangerous. History showed what happened when one species dominated others. The Valorians had started with good intentions too. Humanity had to be careful. Had to remember. Had to stay humble, Chen agreed. She said that was why the monuments mattered. Why the trials mattered. Why teaching children honestly mattered. Memory was a weapon against repetition. If humanity remembered the cost of war, they would be reluctant to fight. If they remembered the danger of power, they would be reluctant to rule. The challenge was making sure each generation learned that the lessons were not lost. They sat on that hill until dawn, watching the stars fade as the sun rose. Chen thought about the future, about the children who would grow up in a free galaxy, about the species rebuilding after centuries of slavery, about the Valorians trying to become something better, about humanity learning to lead without dominating. It would not be easy. Peace never was. Wars had clear goals: defeat the enemy, win the battle, survive. Peace was ambiguous. Success meant maintaining something that was always at risk, preventing conflicts before they started, building relationships between species that had no common history except shared trauma. But Chen was hopeful, cautiously, carefully, because hope was what had won the war. Hope that freedom was possible, that resistance could succeed, that a small planet could stand against an empire. That hope had been rewarded. Now they needed a different kind of hope. Hope that peace could last, that different species could coexist, that power could be used responsibly. The sun rose fully. Chen stood and stretched. She had one more thing to do before leaving Earth. She returned to the memorial, to the wall with 2 million names. She placed her hand on the stone. It was cool and smooth. Each name had been carved with care. Each person remembered. She made a promise to those names, to those people who had died so others could be free. She promised that their sacrifice would not be forgotten, that humanity would not waste the freedom they had won, that the galaxy they had helped create would be better than the one that came before. She did not know if she could keep that promise, but she would try. They all would, because that was what humanity did. They tried, against impossible odds, against overwhelming force, against empires that had stood for millennia. They tried, and sometimes they succeeded. The Valorians had declared humans slaves. They had expected submission. They had gotten wrath instead. Wrath that had erased their civilization, that had freed billions. That had changed the galaxy forever, and now humanity had to prove that the wrath had been righteous, that it had led to something better. Not just destruction, but creation. Not just freedom from, but freedom to build, to grow, to become something the galaxy had never seen. Not conquerors, not slaves, but partners, equals. Species among species, learning together how to make peace as fierce as their war had been. That was the challenge. That was the promise. And Chen believed, despite everything, that humanity was ready for it.
John Miller straightened his tie and took a deep breath. After 20 years as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, this would be his final appearance before them. The massive chamber stretched before him, filled with representatives from over 200 alien species. Most looked down on humans as newcomers, as primitives who had stumbled onto faster-than-light travel by luck rather than skill. The council's curved walls glowed with soft blue light. The 7 elder species sat at the highest tier, as they had for thousands of years. Below them sat the secondary members, species who had been in space for at least 5 centuries. Humans and 30 other developing species occupied the lowest level, where they could barely see the elders at all. The representative from Earth may now address the council, announced the Zalaxian chairperson, not bothering to hide the boredom in his voice. John stepped forward, his footsteps echoing across the suddenly quiet chamber. For 20 years, I have stood in this spot and asked for fair treatment, John began. For 20 years, humans have contributed technology, resources, and ideas to the galactic community. And for 20 years, We have been treated as children who need guidance rather than equals who deserve respect. A murmur spread through the chamber. The elder representatives shifted uncomfortably. They weren't used to such direct language. Earth has fulfilled every requirement you set before us. We have shared our unique technologies. We have opened our borders to trade. We have even limited our military growth as requested. In return, you have taken our innovations, restricted our expansion, and kept us from forming alliances with other species. The chairperson leaned forward. Ambassador Miller, if you have specific complaints, there are proper channels. We have used your proper channels for 2 decades, John cut in. Today, I am not here to file another complaint. I am here to inform you that as of this moment, Earth withdraws from the Galactic Council. The chamber erupted in shouts and gasps. Several representatives stood up in protest. The elders conferred urgently among themselves. This is simply not permitted, the chairperson said when the noise died down. No species has ever withdrawn from the council. The consequences would be severe. John smiled. The consequences have already been severe for us. Now they will be severe for you. He pulled out a small device and pressed it. The holographic Earth flag that had stood behind his speaking position vanished. Effective immediately, all trade agreements with Council species are suspended. All Earth scientists working on Council projects are returning home. All human innovations currently in development will remain Earth property. This is outrageous, shouted a secondary member. Your species cannot survive without Council protection. John looked at them, all one last time. We survived for thousands of years before we met you. I think we'll manage. With that, he turned and walked toward the exit. No human had ever walked out during a council session before. Back on Earth, President Susan Clark watched the broadcast with her advisors. The large screen showed the council in disarray as John left. It's done, she said quietly. Begin Phase 2. Her chief of staff, Bill Gordon, nodded and left the room to give the orders they had prepared years ago. Susan turned to her military advisor. Are our defenses ready? General Kate Morris nodded. Yes, Madam President. The SHIELD network is active. If they try to attack, they'll get a nasty surprise. And our allies? Susan asked her foreign minister. The Nexeri have confirmed their support, he replied. The Trellin and Vox governments will announce their alliance with Earth tomorrow. Susan looked back at the screen. The council members were still arguing, pointing fingers, making threats. None of them understood what had just happened. None of them realized that humanity had been preparing for this day for years. They think we're helpless without them, Susan said. They've never understood us at all. Outside the White House, normal life continued. Citizens went about their day, unaware that their world had just changed forever. But soon, everyone would know. Soon, the galaxy would learn what humanity could really do when freed from the Council's chains, and nothing would ever be the same again. Just 7 days after Earth's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the first signs of trouble appeared. On the trading hub world of Zentura, prices for common goods doubled overnight. Merchants who relied on human metals and minerals found their shelves empty. Council officials tried to calm the growing panic, but their words rang hollow. In the Council's economic chamber, the blue-skinned ex-Loshan named Zix presented his findings to the emergency committee. This is merely the beginning, Zix said, his 6 fingers tapping nervously on the display. Human innovation has become essential to our supply chains. Their unique approach to problem-solving has driven progress in ways we fail to notice. The elder representatives shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a tall Vreelan with silvery scales, spoke up. Surely we can replace human contributions. They've only been in space for 50 years. Zix shook his head. You don't understand. Humans solve problems differently. Where we seek perfection through careful analysis over decades, they find workable solutions in weeks. We've grown dependent on their methods without admitting it. Meanwhile, at the edge of human space, Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiant. The ship was officially classified as a diplomatic vessel. In reality, it carried Earth's newest defensive technology, developed in secret while still under Council restrictions. "Captain, 3 Vreeland warships approaching," reported her first officer, Gary Peters. Lisa nodded calmly. "Hold position. Let them make the first move." The Vreeland ships formed a blockade position. Their commander's face appeared on the main screen. "Earth vessel, this is Commander Threx of the Galactic Council. You are ordered to power down and prepare for inspection." Lisa smiled politely. "Commander, we are in unclaimed space. The Council has no authority here since Earth's withdrawal." The Vreeland scales darkened with anger. "This is your final warning. Power down or face consequences." Lisa looked at Gary and nodded slightly. He pressed a sequence on his console, activating their hidden systems. "We decline," Lisa said simply. The lead Vreeland ship fired what they called a warning shot, a weapon powerful enough to crack a small moon. The energy beam struck the Defiant directly. And nothing happened. The beam hit the invisible shield surrounding the Earth ship and dissipated completely. Not even a flicker of the lights showed that they had been hit. "What is this?" demanded the Vreeland commander, his voice rising in pitch. "This is human innovation," Lisa replied. "The same innovation you restricted and dismissed for decades. We didn't share everything with the Council, Commander. Not by a long shot." Back on Earth, Frank Williams sat in his underground office, reviewing reports from human agents across Council space. As Director of Intelligence, he had placed these operatives years ago, preparing for this moment. "Sir," his assistant said, "we're getting interesting signals from the Nexori worlds." Frank looked up. "What kind of signals?" "Several minor species have approached Nexori diplomats about leaving the Council. They're inspired by our withdrawal." Frank leaned back in his chair. "Sooner than we expected. Make sure our Nexori allies have everything they need to facilitate these conversations." In the Council chambers, the emergency session continued into its 3rd day. The elders argued among themselves, each blaming the others for failing to control the humans properly. "We should have been stricter with them from the beginning," insisted the Duraxian representative. "No, we should have integrated them more fully into our systems," countered the Mercatian delegate. Neither considered that perhaps they should have treated humans as equals. On a small trading outpost near the former Council border, 2 merchants, 1 human and 1 Trellin, finalized a new trade agreement. The human offered fair terms, much better than the Council had ever allowed. "Is it true?" asked the Trellin, his wide eyes blinking rapidly. "Will other species be allowed to join your new alliance?" The human trader nodded. "Earth believes in partnership, not control. Tell your people there's another way forward now." As news spread through the galaxy, the tremors of change grew stronger. The Council had stood for 10,000 years, unquestioned and supreme. Now, for the first time, alternatives were emerging, and many were beginning to wonder what else the humans might have kept hidden during their years of apparent compliance. 3 months after Earth's withdrawal, the resource crisis hit the galaxy hard. Council worlds that had once looked down on primitive humans now faced shortages of critical materials. Elements that Council scientists had dismissed as worthless turned out to be essential components in technologies humans had developed and shared. On the mining colony of Keltura IV, Diane Powell watched as 3 Council officials marched into her office. The human administrator kept her face calm as they demanded she restart shipments to Council worlds. "I'm afraid that's not possible," Diane said, her voice steady. "Earth colonies now trade exclusively with our new partners." The lead official, a tall Duraxian, leaned over her desk. "This is unacceptable. The Council will not be held hostage by human greed." Diane smiled. "It's interesting you mention greed. For years, the Council set prices for our resources at a fraction of their value. Now we trade fairly with the Nexori Confederation." "The Nexori?" The Duraxian's eyes widened. "Those backwater worlds. They were barely considered civilized by Council standards." "Perhaps your standards were wrong," Diane replied. They treat us as equals. You never did. Back on Earth, engineer Paul Nelson stood before a crowd of reporters. Behind him sat a sleek new spacecraft unlike anything humans had publicly revealed before. Today marks the official unveiling of the Aurora Drive, Paul announced. This propulsion system allows travel at speeds the Council claimed were theoretically impossible. How long has this technology existed? Asked a reporter. Paul's expression remained neutral. We developed it 5 years ago, but were prevented from implementing it by Council restrictions. Those restrictions no longer apply. The implications spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Humans had not only been holding back technologies, but had been developing capabilities far beyond what the Council believed possible. In the presidential office in Washington, Susan Clark welcomed an unexpected visitor. The Throck diplomat stood awkwardly in the human-designed room, clearly uncomfortable with Earth's higher gravity. The Council has authorized me to offer generous concessions for Earth's return, the diplomat stated, including a seat among the secondary members and reduced trade restrictions. Susan studied the alien carefully. Just 3 months ago, you wouldn't even consider us for secondary status. What changed? The Throck shifted uncomfortably. Certain supply issues have emerged. The Council believes these can be resolved through renewed cooperation. You mean you're running out of the materials only we can provide? Susan said. And you've realized those materials are more valuable than you admitted. The terms are quite generous, the diplomat insisted. Susan stood. We appreciate the offer, but Earth prefers our new arrangements with equals rather than masters. Please convey that to the Council. After the diplomat left, Susan called her economic advisor. How are our new trade networks developing? Better than expected, he replied. The Nexeri have opened their markets completely to us. The Trellans and Vox are following suit, and 6 more species have reached out about joining our alliance. On the Council capital world, protests broke out in front of the Grand Council building. Citizens from dozens of worlds demanded answers about missing medicines, failing technology, and rising prices. Council security forces pushed them back, but cameras captured the growing unrest. Inside those same council chambers, the elders met in a closed session. We must address the human problem directly, said the Freeland representative. Their defiance threatens the entire galactic order. Our military reports are concerning, admitted the Diraxian elder. The technology displayed by human vessels suggests capabilities we didn't believe they possessed. How did we miss this? Asked another elder. How did they advance so quickly without our knowledge? None wanted to admit the truth, that they had deliberately ignored human potential, convinced of their own superiority. That blindness now threatened everything they had built over thousands of years. In a research facility on Mars, Dr. Michelle Grant reviewed the final tests on a medical breakthrough that would have been suppressed under Council rules. The treatment could save millions across the galaxy, including species the Council had deemed low priority for medical research. Send the data to our Nexeri partners, she told her team. Let's show the galaxy what happens when science serves everyone, not just the powerful. 6 months after Earth's departure, Council research facilities across the galaxy began to stall. Projects that had shown steady progress for years suddenly hit roadblocks. New discoveries dried up. Breakthroughs became rare. The truth was simple but painful for the Council to admit. They had relied on human scientists to solve their hardest problems while taking credit for the solutions. In a private meeting on the Council capital world, the head of the Galactic Science Division faced angry questions from the elders. How is it possible that progress has slowed so dramatically? Demanded the Mercatian elder. Humans were just one species among hundreds in our research network. The science director looked uncomfortable. We assigned human scientists to our most challenging theoretical problems. They had a knack for solving issues that stumped our best minds for decades. And you never thought to mention this. The Vreeland elders' scales darkened with anger. We didn't believe they understood the significance of their work, the director admitted. We thought they were simply lucky. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Michelle Grant published a groundbreaking paper on interspecies medicine. Under Council rules, this research would have been suppressed as potentially destabilizing to the established medical hierarchy. Within days, her work spread across the galaxy through Earth's Noob Alliance network. Hospitals on XRE worlds immediately implemented her treatments, saving thousands of lives among species the Council had deemed low priority for medical care. "We always had the capability to help these people," Michelle told a reporter. "The Council just wouldn't let us." On the Council capital, citizens gathered outside medical centers, demanding access to the new human treatments. Council officials insisted the treatments were untested and dangerous, but leaked reports showed they were simply effective and affordable, threatening the profits of Council medical corporations. In a secure room deep beneath Geneva, Frank Williams, Earth's intelligence director, met with his top analysts. "We've confirmed the breach," said his deputy, Carol Young. "Council military intelligence just discovered that their most sensitive databases were compromised years ago." Frank nodded. "Right on schedule. What's their reaction?" "Panic," Carol replied. "They're realizing we didn't just take our bodies when we left. We took knowledge they claimed we weren't advanced enough to understand." Frank studied the holographic display showing Council fleet movements. "And now they know we know their weaknesses." In space, the balance of power shifted daily. Council battleships that once patrolled human borders now stayed close to their home systems, uncertain of what human ships might be capable of. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, now commanding a squadron of Earth vessels, charted unexplored regions that Council restrictions had placed off-limits to humans. Her ships discovered 3 habitable planets in just 1 month, planets the Council had known about but kept secret from lesser species. They wanted to keep the best worlds for themselves, Lisa told her crew as they established a research outpost on a pristine blue planet. But space is big enough for everyone to have a fair share. On Earth, President Susan Clark received a concerning report. The most aggressive Council species, the Duraxians, were assembling a battle fleet near their homeworld. Intelligence suggested they planned to make an example of Earth to discourage other species from leaving the Council. "They still don't understand us," Susan told her advisors. "They think one show of force will make us surrender." "Should we strike first?" asked her military advisor, General Kate Morris. Susan shook her head. "No, we'll let them throw the first punch. Then they'll learn exactly what they're dealing with." Across the galaxy, minor species watched closely. The Trellans, Vox, and Nexeri had already allied with Earth. Now 12 more species had secret representatives on Earth, discussing terms for joining what was being called the Galactic Cooperative. A Trellan diplomat summed it up best. "For 10,000 years, the Council told us how the galaxy must be ordered. Humans showed us there are other ways, better ways, and we are no longer afraid to try them." The Council's 10-millennia monopoly on truth was crumbling, and not even their mighty fleets could stop it. As the 1-year anniversary of Earth's withdrawal approached, the galaxy entered a new phase of turmoil. 7 species officially announced their departure from the Galactic Council to join Earth's growing alliance. The Council, which had stood unchallenged for 10,000 years, now faced an existential threat. In an emergency session, the Council finally acknowledged the crisis and voted to restore order by any means necessary. The vote was not unanimous, a first in Council history. "We cannot allow this rebellion to continue," the Duraxian elder said to the assembled representatives. "If we must use force to bring the humans back into compliance, then so be it." Only the Mercatian elder voiced concern. "Perhaps we should consider why so many wish to leave. Our treatment of developing species." "Silence," shouted the Vreelan elder. "This is not the time for self-reflection. This is the time for action." The Council approved the assembly of the largest military force seen in 2,000 years. Ships from all elder species gathered near the Duraxian homeworld, preparing for what they believed would be a swift campaign to subjugate Earth and its allies. On Earth, General Steve Martinez stood in the Global Defense Center, watching as the Council fleet took shape. Holographic displays showed the positions of every Council vessel. "Their force is 5 times larger than we anticipated," said his assistant, Major Helen Wright. Steve nodded calmly. "And yet, still smaller than we can handle." "Sir, the Council doesn't understand human warfare, Helen. They fight by rules established millennia ago. We've spent the last 20 years studying their tactics while developing counters they've never seen." Across the room, President Susan Clark entered with her advisors. "General, what's your assessment?" "They'll attack within 2 days," Steve replied. "They're forming a classic Diraxian spearhead formation. They plan to break through our outer defenses in a single push." Susan studied the display. "And our allies? The Nexeri have positioned their fleet to protect their core worlds. The Trellans and Vox are implementing the defense systems we provided, and our new partners are evacuating civilians from border areas." Susan's expression was solemn. "We knew this day would come. We hoped the Council would be reasonable, but prepared for them to be themselves." The first battle occurred near Saturn's rings. The Council sent a vanguard force to test Earth's defenses and establish a forward base. Commander Grace Phillips led a small fleet of Earth vessels to intercept them. From the bridge of her flagship, the U.S. Horizon, Grace watched as the Council force approached, 20 ships against her 5. "All ships, activate Aurora shields," she ordered. "Weapons on standby, but do not fire until fired upon." The Council commander's face appeared on her screen. "Earth vessels, this is Commander Zal of the Galactic Council. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Grace met his gaze steadily. "This is Commander Phillips of Earth Defense. You are in sovereign Earth territory. We have no wish for conflict, but we will defend ourselves if attacked." The alien commander sneered. "You have no concept of what you face, human." The Council ships opened fire, unleashing weapons that could shatter moons. The energy beams struck the Earth vessels and dissipated harmlessly against their shields. "Second warning," Grace said calmly. "Withdraw your forces." Instead, the Council ships fired again, with the same result. Grace sighed. "All ships, implement Battle Plan Echo." What followed shocked the watching Council fleet. The Earth vessels moved with impossible speed, executing maneuvers the Council had deemed physically unworkable. Their weapons targeted specific systems rather than attempting to destroy the Council ships outright. In less than 20 minutes, all 20 Council vessels were disabled but intact, their crews unharmed but unable to fight or flee. Grace opened a channel to all ships. "Your life support remains functional. We will notify the Council of your location for retrieval. Please consider this demonstration when advising your leaders on future actions against Earth." News of the battle spread across Council space, transmitted through both official channels and the network of informants Earth had cultivated. For the first time, Council citizens saw their invincible fleet defeated without the humans even destroying a single ship. On the Council capital, the elders received the news with disbelief. "How is this possible?" demanded the Diraxian elder. "They are just humans." The Mercatian elder looked thoughtful. "Perhaps that is exactly why they won." 18 months after Earth's departure, the Galactic Council's economy began to collapse. What had started as resource shortages and research delays turned into a full system breakdown. Trade routes that had functioned for thousands of years now sat empty. Council credits, once the galaxy's most stable currency, lost value daily. On Earth, economic advisor Alan Peterson watched the situation unfold with mixed feelings. He stood before President Susan Clark and her cabinet, presenting his latest analysis. "The suffering among ordinary citizens of Council worlds wasn't our goal," Alan said, pointing to images of food lines on once prosperous planets. "But it may be necessary for a more fair galactic community to emerge from this crisis." Susan nodded solemnly. "How bad will it get?" "The 7 elder species built a system that kept them on top at everyone else's expense," Alan explained. "Now that system is eating itself. The Duraxians and Vreelands are blaming each other for military failures. The Mercatians can't maintain economic control without human resources. And the common people? Susan asked. They're beginning to question everything they've been told. Council media can't hide the truth anymore, that their leaders have been wrong about humans, wrong about their own superiority, wrong about how the galaxy should function. The meeting was interrupted when a diplomatic aide rushed in. Madam President, the Mercatian Empire has sent an official request for direct negotiations. Outside council channels. This was unprecedented. The Mercatians, the Council's economic powerhouse, had never dealt with lesser species except through Council institutions. 2 days later, Ambassador Nancy Hughes welcomed the Mercatian delegation to the new Galactic Cooperation Center in Geneva. The aliens looked uncomfortable, unused to treating humans as equals. The Mercatian Consortium seeks to establish bilateral trade relations with Earth, their lead negotiator stated stiffly. Recent disruptions have made this a priority. Nancy smiled warmly. We welcome trade with all peaceful species, but we must be clear, Earth now operates under different principles than the Council. We believe in fair exchange and mutual benefit. She slid a data tablet across the table. The Mercatian's eyes widened as he reviewed the proposed terms. These rates are fair, Nancy finished for him. Not exploitative like the Council's. You'll still profit, just not at the extreme levels you're accustomed to. The Mercatians seemed to struggle internally before responding. My government will find these terms acceptable. As news of the Mercatian deal spread, other Council worlds began reaching out directly to Earth. The Council's monopoly on galactic trade was breaking apart. Meanwhile, a new situation developed at Earth's borders. Refugee ships began arriving. Civilians fleeing the economic collapse and political instability of Council worlds. President Clark called an emergency meeting to address the crisis. What are we looking at? She asked her advisors. Mostly ordinary citizens, said her security chief. Some are scientists who want to work freely. Others are merchants who see opportunity. Many are from species the Council considered expendable. Susan didn't hesitate. We welcome them all. Set up processing centers. Find them homes and work. Show the galaxy that our quarrel was never with its people, only with the Council's corrupt system. On a refugee processing station near Mars, a young family of Trellans met with a human aid worker. The father, clutching his 2 children close, spoke softly. We heard humans treat everyone fairly, even newcomers. Is this true? The aid worker, Sam Cooper, smiled. It's what we strive for. We haven't always gotten it right in our own history, but we've learned from our mistakes. That's something the Council never did. The Trellans seemed to relax slightly. The Council told us humans were dangerous, unpredictable, but they also said you would collapse without their guidance. That was clearly a lie. Sam nodded. There were many lies, but now you can see the truth for yourself. Back on the Council Capitol, the once Grand Council chamber was half empty. Representatives from more than 30 worlds had simply stopped attending. The remaining members argued constantly, their unity shattered. The Duraxian elder pounded his fist on the table. Enough. We must strike at Earth directly. Show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us. The Vreeland elder hissed in agreement. A decisive victory would bring the lesser species back in line. Only the Mercatian elder remained silent, knowing what his government had already done, reached out to the humans in desperation. The foundations of the old order weren't just cracking now. They were crumbling completely. 2 years after humanity's departure, the unthinkable happened. The Galactic Council, which had ruled for 10 millennia, officially dissolved. What began as a unified body of elder species devolved into competing factions, each blaming the others for failing to recognize the human threat. The announcement came not with grand ceremony, but with a simple message broadcast across all standard communication channels. The Galactic Council has concluded its final session. All member worlds are released from charter obligations. On Earth, President Susan Clark watched the broadcast with her advisors. The room was silent as the magnitude of what they had accomplished settled in. "We never set out to destroy the council," Susan said quietly. "We just wanted to be treated as equals." "The council destroyed itself," replied her chief diplomat, Jack Nelson. "Their system couldn't survive being questioned." Susan turned to her military chief. "And the Duraxians?" "Still making threats," General Kate Morris answered. "The other former elder species are distancing themselves, but the Duraxians refuse to accept the new reality." Susan nodded. "Then we need to prepare for one final confrontation." Admiral Kevin Russell commanded Earth's diplomatic fleet as it traveled to former Council worlds. His mission was to visit each planet and offer membership in the new Galactic Cooperative. On the bridge of his flagship, the U.S. Liberty, he greeted delegations from worlds that once looked down on humans. "The cooperative has only one core principle," Kevin explained to representatives from a dozen species. "All sentient beings deserve equal rights, equal opportunities, and equal voices in decisions that affect them." A former council diplomat spoke up. "But surely some species must lead. Some must have greater influence based on their age and wisdom." Kevin smiled. "Age doesn't guarantee wisdom. The council proved that. In the cooperative, influence comes from what you contribute, not who you are or how long your civilization has existed." Many accepted Earth's offer eagerly, having suffered under council rule for centuries. Some remained hesitant, cautious after millennia of council propaganda about human unpredictability. Then came the day the Duraxians made their move. A battle fleet of 100 ships appeared near Earth's orbit, having used ancient jump technology that bypassed standard detection systems. The Duraxian commander's message was broadcast globally. "Humans, you have destroyed what took thousands of years to build. For this crime, your world will be reduced to ash. The galaxy will witness the price of defiance." Earth had anticipated this final, desperate attack. The planetary defense system, now fully operational, activated automatically. A network of satellites circling the planet locked onto the Duraxian vessels. President Clark addressed the Duraxian commander directly from the defense center. "Your weapons cannot harm us. Your threats cannot frighten us. I ask you one final time to stand down." "Humans do not give orders to Duraxians," the commander snarled. "Open fire." The Duraxian ships launched their attack simultaneously, unleashing planet-killing weapons against Earth. The energy blasts hit the planetary shield and stopped. Not a single weapon penetrated. Earth's response was measured and precise. Rather than destroying the Duraxian ships, the defense system targeted their engines and weapon systems. Within minutes, the entire fleet drifted powerless in space. "This is Earth defense," General Morris announced to the disabled fleet. "Your life support systems remain functional. We will not destroy your vessels or harm your crews. Transport ships are on the way to return your people safely to Duraxian space." The Duraxian commander could not comprehend this response. "Why would you spare us? We would not have shown you such mercy." "That's the difference between us," Susan replied simply. "And why the council failed while we succeed." On the former council capital, reporter Julia Bennett documented a historic moment. Species that had been enemies for millennia worked side by side, dismantling the ornate council chambers. The building would be repurposed as a cultural center open to all galactic citizens. "What do you think happens next?" Julia asked an older Mercatian who was carefully removing a symbolic arch. The Mercatian considered the question. "Something new. Something better, I hope. The humans have shown us another way is possible." Across the galaxy, worlds that had lived in fear of council retribution for thousands of years looked to the stars with new hope. The impossible had happened, and a better future beckoned. 5 years after humanity's withdrawal, the galaxy had transformed completely. The rigid hierarchy imposed by the Council for 10,000 years had been replaced by the Galactic Cooperative, a true democracy where all species had equal representation, regardless of their technology level or how long they had traveled among the stars. On the anniversary of withdrawal, now celebrated across human space as Independence Day, President Susan Clark stood before a crowd gathered in Washington. Representatives from over 100 species sat in the audience, many from worlds that had once looked down on humans as primitive. 5 years ago, we took a step into the unknown. Susan began. We chose freedom over submission, equality over hierarchy, cooperation over control. Many doubted we could survive without council protection. Some feared we would become what we opposed, another power-seeking dominance. Today, we can see the results of our choice. She gestured to the diverse gathering before her. The cooperative now includes 217 member worlds. Trade flows freely. Knowledge is shared openly. And no species stands above others claiming superior wisdom or rights. As Susan finished her speech, she made a surprising announcement. Today marks my last address as president. In accordance with our laws, I will step down and welcome my successor. Leadership should never become permanent, a lesson the council never learned. The crowd rose in standing ovation as Susan welcomed her successor, Daniel Wright, to the stage. The peaceful transfer of power symbolized everything the cooperative stood for, that no individual or group should hold authority forever. Across the galaxy, the anniversary was marked in different ways. On former council worlds, citizens celebrated their new freedoms. On planets once deemed too primitive for council membership, people rejoiced in their equal status. Even on the homeworlds of the former elder species, many embraced the new order, finding unexpected benefits in treating others as equals. Most of the elder species had eventually joined the cooperative, though with significantly reduced influence. Their representatives privately admitted that the galaxy functioned better under the new arrangement than it ever had under their rule. The Duraxians were the last to join, their pride wounded by their defeat at Earth's hands. But necessity proved stronger than ancient prejudice. Their economy could not survive isolation, and the benefits of cooperative membership eventually outweighed their resistance. In rural Montana, former Ambassador John Miller sat on the porch of his small farmhouse, watching the sunset. The man whose walkout had started the transformation had chosen a quiet retirement, away from politics and diplomacy. A message alert chimed from his communication device. John was surprised to see the sender, the last arch-counselor of the defunct Galactic Council, a Mercatian who had once refused to even speak directly to human representatives. The message was brief. History will record that you were right, and we were wrong. The galaxy is better for it. John smiled but didn't reply. No response was needed. The results spoke for themselves. In orbit above Earth, the cooperative's new headquarters neared completion, a massive station where representatives from all member worlds could meet as equals. Its central chamber was circular, with no raised platforms or special seats for any species. By design, no one stood above others. In schools across the galaxy, children of hundreds of species learned a new history, how a young species called humans had challenged the established order not through conquest, but by simply refusing to accept inequality as natural or necessary. On the station, a simple plaque near the entrance bore words that would have been unthinkable under council rule. No species is inherently superior to any other. Our differences strengthen us. Our diversity guides us. Our equality defines us. A young Trellan student visiting the station with her class read the words aloud. She turned to her human guide with curiosity. Was it hard to change things? The council existed for so long. The guide, an older woman named Betty Harris, considered the question carefully. The hardest part wasn't standing up to the council. It was believing we could create something better. Once we believed that, everything else followed. As ships from hundreds of worlds docked at the station, carrying representatives to the cooperative's annual gathering, the stars themselves seemed brighter. The ancient chains of hierarchy had been broken, and the galaxy's future stretched out before them, unwritten, unbound, and full of possibility.